Imagine London in 1810, a foggy evening under flickering gaslights. A restless crowd waits outside a dim hall. You've each paid money for a special show. Inside, on a small stage, stands a young African woman, barely dressed. She wears a tight, skin-colored outfit that makes her seem almost naked. A showman walks around her, shouting for her to sing, dance, and turn this way and that. People in the crowd push forward, poking her bare skin to see if she's real. Whispers spread. Surprise, excitement, disgust. Many English eyes stare at her body and features which are new to them. The young woman tries to look calm. She stares back at the audience that treats her like less than a person. In that moment, the terrible truth of her life is clear. This is Sarah Baartman, not an artist, but a human oddity. A freak show exhibit. How did a kind young woman from South Africa end up in a London sideshow, shamed in front of so many? The answer is a sad story of being used, a journey that only got worse. Before we start this story, tell me where you're watching from. Comment below with your city or country. It's really cool that we can all connect from around the world to talk about these interesting historical events. If you like learning about fascinating secrets from the past, click subscribe. I have many more great stories coming. Sarah Baartman was born around 1789 in a peaceful valley in South Africa. She was part of the Khoikhoi people. She lost her mother when she was a baby, and her father soon after. Alone, she grew up working on farms owned by Europeans. She kept a tortoiseshell necklace, probably her mother's, as a reminder of a life she barely remembered. By the 1790s, she moved to Cape Town. Europeans had taken over the area, forcing people like Sarah to find work in the growing city. There, people started to notice how she looked. She was short, less than 5 feet tall, but had very round hips and buttocks. This body shape, called steatopegia, was common for Khois and women, but strange to Europeans. While working for a Dutch farmer named Hendrik Caesars, Sarah's body became a show. Curious strangers came to visit. Caesars saw a chance to make money. He started showing her off in hospitals to doctors and visitors. One day, a Scottish military doctor named Alexander Dunlop saw her. Dunlop was not just a doctor. He bought and sold strange things. He believed Sarah's body could make him famous and rich in Europe. He offered her a deal: travel to London, perform on stage, and share the money. Sarah, likely not understanding the real danger, agreed, but only if Caesars came with her. He was familiar, maybe more trustworthy than the doctor. In April 1810, they sailed to London. What she found there would break any hope she had left. When Sarah arrived in London, Britain was strange. They had outlawed the slave trade, but people still paid to see an African woman displayed like an animal. Dunlop and Caesars wasted no time. They put up posters saying, "Come see the Hottentot Venus. It's a living wonder from the wild parts of Africa." The name itself was hurtful. Hottentot was a bad word for her people, and Venus was a cruel joke. They marketed her appearance as something mysterious and thrilling, a blend of uniqueness and sensuality. Sarah never appeared fully naked. That would have broken the law. But she wore tight, see-through costumes that showed every curve, turning her into something to stare at under the stage lights. She sang old songs, danced, and posed when told. For extra money, people could step forward and touch her. One part of the show made her cry. When strangers touched her body, it was the most shameful part, and it happened every night. To British audiences, she was not a woman, but a curiosity, a science puzzle, a symbol of race, something to wonder at, make fun of, or study. More people came, more attention grew. Scientists, artists, reporters, and London's rich people came to see her. Sarah Baartman became very well known, the most talked about woman in London. But not everyone watched quietly. People fighting against slavery were shocked. They said her treatment was just slavery by another name, with lights and money. By November 1810, the public argument grew very strong. Sarah's case went to court, to one of Britain's highest legal groups. They asked, was Sarah free, or was she being held against her will? She came to court dressed in nice clothes, smiling quietly through someone who spoke for her. She said she was not treated badly, that she shared the money, and that she would go home in 5 years. But most people didn't believe it. Most history experts now agree, Sarah was probably told what to say. The deal was fake. But her words were enough. The case was thrown out. The court allowed the show to continue. By law, Sarah was free. But in truth, she remained trapped, controlled, shamed, and helpless. It was strange, but the trial made her more famous. News reports brought bigger crowds. Sarah's pain became a national sensation, and business boomed again. Her manager Caesars told critics she has as much right to show herself as a tall Irish man or a dwarf. As if that answered if she had dignity, she kept touring, city to city, fair to fair. Sometimes she was even baptized and shown as a married woman to make it seem like she had a normal life. But make no mistake, Sarah Baartman's life in Britain was like being a slave. Her body was owned, her movements controlled, her silence forced. Even as the spotlight followed her, it became a prison. The newness wore off. The crowds started to shrink. Her so-called guardians looked for other ways to make money. By 1814, they found a new buyer, a new city, and an even worse horror. In September 1814, Sarah Baartman was sent across the sea to France, not as a guest or a performer, but as property. She had been sold. She arrived in Paris with a man named Henry Taylor, who gave her to Jean Rowe, a showman and animal trainer. To him, she was just goods. Paris welcomed her with the same strange interest as London. But here, she had no legal help, no anti-slavery groups, no court, no one to question what was done to her. Rowe showed her in traveling shows and at rich people's parties. He put her next to animals. He even put a collar around her neck to make it seem like she was not fully human. She was now seen as both a show and a scientific sample. At rich Paris homes, she was the surprise ending, a rare creature brought in to shock and amuse the rich. At one such party, she was reportedly forced to crawl like an animal, while guests laughed, drank, and threw coins. Her name was forgotten. She was just the Venus. But something darker was coming. France's top scientists noticed her. They were obsessed with different races. Sarah's body was a prize they wanted to study. They believed Khoisan women had a more primitive body shape. A false story about a certain body part made them want to examine her, to prove their racist ideas true. Famous scientist Georges Cuvier, Napoleon's own body expert, took a special interest. He arranged for her to be studied at a special garden. Their artists drew her naked. Body experts looked at her without her permission. She was poked, measured, compared to animals, always without respect. Some said she agreed to pose. Others say she refused to take off the special cloth that covered her private parts. But in the end, they undressed her anyway. These were not studies. They were harmful acts that they called science. Sarah was made into nothing but an idea they wanted to prove. As winter came, Sarah's health got worse. Many years of cold, stress, shame, and hunger took their toll. She was only 26, but her body was failing. France was in trouble after Napoleon's fall. Fewer people came to see her. Her captors made less money. Some believe they forced her to be a prostitute. In a bad house in Paris, Sarah was reportedly seen working. Whether forced or left alone, she had nowhere else to go. On December 29, 1815, Sarah Baartman died. The reason was unclear. Maybe lung sickness, maybe a bad disease. But it wasn't just illness that killed her, it was Europe. She died without money in a foreign land, surrounded by strangers who had trapped, touched, mocked, and studied her. But even in death, Sarah Baartman was not allowed to rest. Her body was barely cold when the scientists claimed her. Georges Cuvier, the man who studied her when she was alive, asked for her body to cut up. He got it. Cuvier didn't want to honor Sarah. He wanted to prove his idea that Africans were more like animals than Europeans. Her death became his chance. In early 1816, he started the process. He took out her brain, her organs, her private parts. Her bones were boiled, her flesh removed. Cuvier made a plaster copy of her body, keeping her curves in death, just as they had been stared at in life. It became part of his collection. He put her brain and private organs in jars with alcohol. She was now an exhibit, a lasting one. Cuvier wrote a report. In it, he said Sarah was smart, graceful, and spoke many languages. But then he compared her to an ape. He claimed her ears were like an animal's, that her movements were like an ape's. His ideas were accepted across Europe. Other scientists used Sarah's remains to say black people were wild in sex, that African women were different by nature, less good. Her body became proof in building a racist ladder. White at the top, black at the bottom. Sarah wasn't just used, she was made into a weapon. Her plaster copy, bones, and organs were put on display in Paris museums. Tourists came to stare, generations stared. They put her with her back turned to show off her buttocks, the same part that made her famous, the same part that ruined her life. She became a silent exhibit, labeled and set up for the biggest effect. No name, no voice, just the Hottentot Venus behind glass. For over 150 years, Sarah Baartman was a museum object. Not a woman, not a person, just a story told through bones and skin. It wasn't until the 1970s that her display was finally removed. Her remains were put away. She was still trapped in Europe, still waiting to go home. For over 100 years, Sarah Baartman's remains sat in French museums, stripped of her humanity, culture, and name. But her people never forgot her. In South Africa, poets and activists said her name. She became a symbol of harsh colonial rule, of black womanhood, of dignity taken and never given back. In 1998, South African poet Diana Ferris wrote a poem called "I Have Come to Take You Home." That poem helped start a worldwide movement. By then, apartheid had ended. A new South Africa was rising. In 1994, President Nelson Mandela officially asked France, "Bring Sarah Baartman home." It took years. France pushed back. Laws had to be changed. But in 2002, the French government passed a law allowing her remains to return. On May 6, 2002, Sarah's preserved bones, bottled organs, and plaster copy were flown to South Africa. For the first time in 192 years, she came home. She was met not with staring eyes, but with quiet respect, sadness, and mourning. A plane carried her like a queen, wrapped in the colors of her people. In August 2002, thousands gathered in Hanky, where she was born. Leaders, elders, and children stood on the land she once walked as a girl. They buried her on a hilltop called Degrading. Stones were laid, prayers were said. The sun shone over the valley. Sarah was finally at peace. The date, August 9th, was Women's Day in South Africa, a day to honor strength, patience, and voices that history tried to silence. Sarah Baartman was home, not as the Hottentot Venus, not as a copy or a curiosity, but as a woman, a daughter of the land, and a symbol of coming back. Sarah Baartman's life was stolen by a show. Her body was used to entertain, to make theories, to make her seem less human. But in death, she became something her captors never expected: a voice. Today, she stands as a symbol of unfairness based on race, of how science, entertainment, and power all work together to destroy one woman, and how that woman still rose to tell her story. Schools now teach her name. Museums remember her differently. Statues honor her. A place in South Africa is named after her. She is no longer forgotten. Her story makes us ask, what does fairness look like for those who had no voice? How do we honor those whose worth was taken away? The answer is to remember her. It's in her bones coming home, in poems, in movies, in stories like this one shared over time so she can never be erased again. Sarah Baartman was once treated as less than human, but now she reminds us of what it means to be human. To see others, to speak up against silence, to remember. She is no longer a Venus made for strangers' eyes. She is Sarah.